Part 1. It was a beautiful morning. The sun's rays was slowly warming the planet as we made our way through the jungle. Finally stopping in a tiny clearing, settling down to make some breakfast. We were tired from hiking all night. But this was no ordinary hike. I was part of a platoon sent into the jungle to take out a terrorist group based 2 days hike from our drop zone, and we had barely covered the first day. So I could relax. The troops were at ease, in high spirits, joking as they rustle up some grub. Some had settled down, making themselves comfortable against some nearby trees for some much-needed shut-eye. Even though that felt like a good idea, I couldn't relax. I felt so uneasy. I felt almost as if we were being watched. But obviously that couldn't be the case. Our intel suggests that we would only encounter resistance much further down the way. So I settled down, grabbed something to eat out of my pack, and relaxed with a few of my troops while they were having a laugh at a joke one of them had just made. It wasn't a long stay. After a few hours of shut-eye, we began making our way. We'd make another stop before nightfall. That's when we planned on gearing up for the dangerous part of our mission. Entering into the cave of the dragon. There were a few of us who would venture ahead, radioing back any anomalies they would find. These were brave men. That wasn't a job I would readily choose to volunteer for. There'd be no escape if they were seen first, directly placing the whole mission, and all of our lives in danger. I pray they'd be okay. We continue our hike into the jungle, following the path the advanced team had cleared for us. The sun is now weighing heavy on our shoulders. We're tired and thirsty, but we must soldier on. We packed limited supplies, so we had to use our water sparingly. We never had the luxury to rest at that point. We had to move on. But it was okay. This is what we were trained for. To survive the harsh climate we found ourselves in. Even though it was a dangerous mission, with casualties almost a guarantee, the troops were all still in high spirits, talking about their plans when they got back home. Mentioning spending time with their families, to some even talking about starting a family of their own. It was probably a good thing though. Keeping their spirits high. Giving them a reason to fight, and win. It's been several hours since our last stop, and the sun was noticeably dipping low in the sky. It was probably a good time to stop, and refuel. And also to prepare for the dangerous part of our mission. All we had to do at that point was wait for the thumbs up from the advancing team. So after finding a spot, the troops dropped their gear. And as before, some would grab some shut-eye, while others kept the chatter up. Joking mostly, probably to help them ease their minds on what was lying ahead. Then finally, we received radio contact from the advanced team confirming, no threat ahead. You could see the relief in the soldiers' eyes after receiving that message. It meant that the advancing team was okay, and they had almost reached our rendezvous point, where we were meant to regroup, and finalize our mission, forming our plan of attack. They were merely a few hours ahead of us at that point. But we were to make that part of our journey in the dark. We were given high-tech night vision goggles to wear for this part of our mission. But most of the soldiers did not like this gadget, complaining it made their eyes hurt. But we had no choice. Moving in the dark with a 10-man platoon is easily spotted during the day. Keeping our presence a secret is our greatest weapon right now. We had no way to successfully defend ourselves against an ambush attack, especially during the day. We'd be mowed down in seconds. But with our advance team successfully completing their mission, we believed we had the upper hand. The enemy had no idea we were even there. We were geared up and ready for the next phase of our mission. At this point the men were no longer chatting, no longer making jokes, no longer laughing. Things had become more serious. Even though one of the boys cracks a joke, the laughter was hardly there, with a few smiles and chuckles coming from some of the men. It was clear that their situation had become real. Their minds were now on the mission, and they were clearly more alert. We hardly made our way into the darkness when a voice calls out over the radio. It was the advanced team, radioing in. That was unusual. They were meant to keep radio silence. They were only meant to call in much later to check on our location. The men stops dead in their tracks as we respond. The voice on the other end reports noticing activity below them, about a few hundred yards from our rendezvous point. Explaining that they can see our intended target. But that too was strange. Our intended target was meant to be a few clicks north of our rendezvous point. Their plan was to split up, for a closer look. Personally, I felt that wasn't a good idea, but it wasn't my decision to make. We were ordered to continue as planned. Several minutes later, we received an update on the situation. The radio operator now claims that they were about 60 feet from our target. But his voice seemed puzzling. He states by saying, "I don't know what I'm looking at, it's unreal." We asked him to elaborate. He further states, "I can't explain. This isn't real, this is not." And that's when the communication suddenly ends. We try to re-establish contact, but without success. And that was the last we heard from the team. The troops are now clearly scared. They don't know what to think. Maybe it's a technical glitch. But we had a mission to complete, and we continue on, into the jungle. The troops moved with slight hesitation. Not knowing what would happen to us. When it would happen to us. We moved as silently as we could. No one spoke. All you could hear was the brushing away of the bushes as we made our way deeper into the unknown. My heart was pounding, harder and faster the closer we got to our rendezvous point, not knowing what we would see once we got there. If we ever got there. I was scared, really scared. My mind starts to think, what am I doing here? Why am I here? Then it dawns on me, I'm fighting another man's war. I have no beef with these terrorists. They did me no wrong. And if they spot us, it's only natural for them to see us as the enemy. They were given the same orders, to destroy the enemy, like we were given. It made no sense. I could be sitting in an office, and after a long day's work, have a drink with my colleagues, before driving home to my wife and kids, in my luxury SUV, safe, and unknowing of the dangers lurking out there. We were now getting closer to our rendezvous point. We were maybe only a half a mile away. That's when it was decided that we should stop, and send a two-man crew ahead while we slowly moved behind them, watching our backs as we proceed. When we finally got to visual distance from the spot, that's when we noticed the two soldiers sent ahead, standing there. Just standing there. In the open, staring down the hill, not moving, just staring. Why weren't they hiding? They could easily been seen. We moved faster towards them, hoping that our presence hadn't been noticed by the enemy. But when we got to them ourselves, and had a look at what they were staring at, it shocked us all. What we were looking at was not possible. It was amazing yet scary at the same time. We too were now frozen, simply staring at what could simply be described as impossible. We were forced to remove our night vision goggles at that point. What we saw, hovering about a few feet above the trees, was an aircraft like no other. A saucer-shaped aircraft resembling what is commonly known as a UFO. An unidentified flying object. But what was astonishing was its size, which was to my eye approximately 300 feet in diameter, at least. With lights randomly strobing from the edges, then flashing on and off in a sequence of colors. At some point we pulled ourselves together and dropped to the ground, pointing our weapons at the UFO, not knowing what to do next. The men all whispered amongst themselves, should we open fire? No one knew what to do next. Personally, I was happy heading to where we were planned to be airlifted out. I wanted nothing more than to go home. And I'm sure I wasn't the only one feeling that way at that point. But we were ordered to scout for the advancing team. leaving no man behind. After pulling ourselves together, we slowly head down the hill, keeping our eyes glued to the craft, not letting it out of our sights. It was truly an amazing sight to see. Silently hovering. We were barely a few yards from the craft when suddenly we noticed red and blue sparks bursting from beneath, followed by a screeching sound that I cannot describe. At that point we all hit the ground, pointing our machine guns towards it once again, with screams from the soldiers calling out to shoot, but no one pulled their trigger. It was almost as if we knew that our bullets could do the craft no harm, at most it would only give our position away. Suddenly, there was a bright light radiating from the entire craft, to the point where we could see nothing but this light. And then, silence, and darkness. I could see nothing but blackness. I remember thinking at that point, am I dead? Then I heard the familiar voices of the soldiers gradually getting louder as I slowly realized that I was still alive, still in the jungle. Laying in some bushes. My eyes were slowly beginning to adjust. It was morning, with the sun's rays slowly making its way through the branches of the trees above us. Then I heard a familiar sound slowly getting louder as it seemed to approach us. It was our military choppers heading in to airlift us out. But what happened to us? It was near midnight when we encountered the craft, but now it was daybreak. Where did all the time go? I got up and noticed the rest of the men in a daze. Some still lying on the ground, with others helping them to their feet. Amazingly, we were suddenly lying near the spot we were to be airlifted to safety. Surprisingly, we were all okay. As I watched the choppers descend from the sky, my first thoughts were, what happened to the advancing team? Where were they? We ran towards our ride out, and after a head count, it was confirmed that there was no casualties. No one was missing. The advanced team was in the second chopper. They were safe. We proceed to take off, and as we took to the skies, I looked down into the jungle, like the rest of us must have been doing. But noticed nothing out of the ordinary. We looked at one another, confused, with one man saying out loud, "What happened?" But there was no reply from any of us. At that point I didn't care anymore. I was simply happy we were safe, and going home.